mode.
Aha, that's because I was muted. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Engineers of Today. Let's go through all this again. Hey Mateo, sorry it took so long. There's always a little song and dance I have to go through at the beginning. So like I usually have to sit out here for a minute and wait for this thing to tell me what I'm supposed to do, even though I already know what to do, and it's all very annoying. So that's usually why I kind of sit here for a minute uh, before the presentation actually gets started. So that's just so you know. That's also me complaining. Anyway, I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you had a good holiday. I know I'm running through this pretty fast, but I'm actually just recapping everything I just said that you guys didn't hear for the last 3 minutes. Um, hey, Cohen. We did Fusion 360, and so we spent some time actually getting everything set up last Wednesday, but that was the first actual hands-on experience we had of Fusion 360, so I'm going to spend the first about 10 minutes or so actually talking to you guys, not just talking to a muted microphone at my screen, um, so that you guys actually have context as to what we're going over. And then we'll actually continue where we left off. So, woo, all right. That was a bit interesting. Hopefully, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Just me sort of sitting here and wiggling my mouse around and things like that in utter silence. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Fusion 360. You guys are more than welcome to do that as well. Although, as I said, it's going to be largely review. In addition to that, I'm also going to go over how we entered in the user parameters again because mine did not save. So I'm going to have to do that anyway. And then we'll go from there. Realistically, it's probably going to take me about 15 minutes to go over everything that we went over last Wednesday, but I'll try and make it as quick as possible because I know you guys. Hopefully, everything should have saved, and so you already have everything up to where we got on Wednesday anyway. I just want to go over it again as a reminder so that you guys have that. It's opening. It always takes a while to open, so I'm just going to let it do that. Does look cool. It's a neat little splash screen. And then there's a less neato splash screen. Excuse me, I'm drinking water. If it's super loud, I apologize. Okay. There we go. Now we're looking at this. So let me go ahead and open up the previous project, and I can do that by clicking the little 9 squares over here and have it not be saved. I totally asked to save it. Oh well. This will just be a good way of going over everything again. So let me go ahead and remember we have our units listed here. I'm going to go ahead and change that Well, I'm going to keep that at inches, actually, because everything's going to be measured in inches. And remember, all of our sort of sketching and everything is going to be all under these menus right here. And you can click on the little name of the menu in order to bring up a drop-down which has everything on it. So I'm going to go over to change parameters, which allows me to set those user parameters, which is what we ended up doing on Wednesday. And we spent a fair amount of time doing that because there were a decent number of user parameters. So let me go ahead and bring that up. And enter in all those user parameters again. Boop, boop, boo. Boop, boop, boo. Boop, boop, boo. I can't do that. I have to move this one over here. You guys should already have this, though, since this is what we did in the Wednesday class, so don't sweat it. Anyway, we just spent, oh, I don't know, about 10-ish minutes or so entering in all this stuff. And remember, everything was divided in half because we're making a bookshelf that's going to be about an eighth the size of how much it was last time. 0 points. Let's see here. 0, 3. No. 3, 7, 5. Let's just go ahead and test that out. 725 divided by 2. 3625. I was close. And by close, I mean not really close at all. 0.3625. 0.375 divided by 2. No, 2, not 12. 1875. Okay. No, we'll keep the cutter the same. That's right. Because the cutter is going to be the same thing no matter what. The cutter is the mill end on the CNC machine, so that's not going to change, even though the shelf is, or the bookshelf is getting smaller. 6 inches. Might have a bit of a hard time storing books on this. Then again, you might not. Kick 1 inch. Tab 1.5. Offset was set to 0. And I know this goes a little bit beyond just review and more me actually setting everything up again. But hopefully this gives you a good idea of what we were going for. Anyway, we set up all these user parameters, and they allowed us to actually have basically some variables that store all of the measurements that we want to keep track of on a regular basis. That is, the different common dimensions that we're going to have, like, for instance, the height, width, and depth of the bookshelf. We're going to be referencing those a few times, so that's why we want to make sure that we have those handy. Now, as far as controls for the thing are concerned, remember, we got the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. We can click and hold the mouse wheel in order to pan, although annoyingly, if your computer's like mine, it will also zoom out while it's doing that, so you'll always just have to zoom in. You might also just want to zoom in, or zoom out and then zoom in, because it will always zoom in wherever your cursor is. So you can always just zoom out a little bit and then point to somewhere where you want to zoom in and then zoom in order to pan to a different point or move to a different point. Sure, you guys should already have them, though. Hold on. Okay, let me take a few minutes and type these all up. And again, these are all going to be in inches. .36 crud. 725 divided by 3625. Okay. Here. 25. Cutter 0.375. Shelf 6. Kick 1. Tab 3. Offset 0. It might be weird that we have a 0-inch measurement, but that's if we want to ensure that there's no distance between two objects, like they're actually touching, we can use the offset to ensure that they're actually like contacting one another. Line tab apply times 0.6 and blind pocket apply times 0.62. We move this over to the side so that you have that available. Oop. Bring up Fusion again, move it over here. Okay, so yeah, zooming with the mouse wheel, panning by clicking and holding the mouse wheel, or zooming out and zooming in where you want to look at, rotating by dragging the cube in the upper right-hand corner. And you can just go crazy with it. You can also click on any of these particular facets, including the corners and the edges, in order to get a front-on view of that particular part of whatever you're working with. You can also click this home button in order to return back to the original orientation, which is the basically the top right three-quarter view, which is looking at the top, front, and right sides equally. And then you can utilize all of these tools in order to get a better view of the object you're looking at. Now we're looking at a grid right now, which is actually a basically a grid representation of the dimensions that we're working with. So each of these, if we zoom out all the way, we can see over here each mark represents a specific distance. In this case, ½ an inch. So this square right here is ½ an inch by ½ an inch. These 4 squares are 1 square inch, and then you've got subdivisions on top of that. If we zoom in a little bit more, we can see those. So you've got roughly 1/10 of an inch for each division at that point, although it doesn't quite work itself out perfectly. Just in case you've forgotten, you've got this little circle in the middle, this black and white circle, gray and white circle. That's the origin. That's where all 3 axes are meeting. So if we were to rotate this, so we're looking at the right, we can see that there is a second, you can imagine just in your head 2 planes intersecting that are perpendicular to one another. So like if we were to go back to this view, we could think of the other plane as obviously much larger, but kind of like rising up and out of this plane right here. So it's at like it's perpendicular to the plane that we're looking at right now, and that is a terrible, terrible drawing. Anyway, that origin point is where all 3 axes, the X, Y, and Z axes, intersect with one another. And so we can use that in order to center ourselves, no pun intended, but to get an idea of what we're looking at. The red represents the X-axis, the blue represents either the Y or the Z, depending upon their particular orientation, and the green represents whatever the blue one is not. So if the blue is Y, then the green one is Z. If the blue one is Z, then the green one is Y. And you can use those things to orient yourself within the context of the drawing. Now, as I was saying on Wednesday, drawing in creating a 3D model in Autodesk Fusion 360 basically involves starting with a 2-dimensional drawing and just sort of extruding it like Play-Doh. Kind of, you can think of like taking a whole handful of Play-Doh and shoving it through one of those like little star-shaped holes, and then you get like this weird long star spaghetti noodle thing. Doing that in order to create 3D representations of whatever you want to create. So since we start with 2D drawings, Star Kitty, yeah, exactly. Since we start with 2D drawings, we have this whole area over here, specifically the sketch menu, devoted to creating very specific 2D drawings. There's a whole bunch of options for them, so we can start out with a more complex shape in order to arrive at the shape that we want. So in our case, since it's just a rectangular bookshelf, we're actually going to start with a 2-point rectangle. Now when I click on that, if you'll remember, we get these 3 squares that pop up. And they don't look like squares, they look like rhombuses. But the thing is, they're actually squares. We're just looking at them at an angle. Just like how these don't look like perfect squares up here because we're looking at them at an angle. And in fact, these represent the different faces up here as well. Now they're a bit reversed because it's kind of like we're looking at the inside of the, like everything's kind of flipped around. But regardless, what you do want to remember is you want to remember this. The bottom one is the one we want to use if we're starting a drawing from a top-down perspective, as if we're drawing the top of whatever we're making and, extruding it downwards or maybe even extruding it upwards. This one over here on the right-hand side represents the front face. This is where we'd want to start drawing if we wanted to start by drawing the front of our object. This one over here on the left, confusingly, represents the right face. So we'd start drawing from this face if we want to start drawing our object from the side, specifically from the right side. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be the right side, but it would be the right side orientation. You'll see what I mean. Anyway, what we did is we started with the right side orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and everything just rotates. So now we're looking at the X and the Z or Y axis. I have to stick to something, so I'll call it the Z axis. And then it was just simply a matter of drawing a rectangle from the origin. And that's it. It was super easy. And as you guys probably heard me say a million billion times as I was doing this, the size of the rectangle right now does not matter, because there are 2 aspects to sketching something in Fusion 360. They are creating the general shape, and then they are constraining them to specific measurements, because this is an engineering-based 3D modeling software. So what I mean by that is Fusion 360 specifically requires explicit dimensions to everything that you draw on it in order for it to be considered valid, because it wants to make sure that all those dimensions check out and nothing overlaps or floats out in the middle of nowhere or anything like that. And you want to make sure of that too. So for that reason, they introduced basically a restriction or a requirement that you dimension everything in order for it to be considered a valid drawing. Now, there's 2 sides to this. They require that, but sketching and then dimensioning things will also ensure that whatever you make will be exactly the dimensions you want to. If you draw something and then you dimension it afterwards, the drawing will resize itself in order to make sense with the dimensions that you were using. That is to say, this rectangle will either grow or shrink based on the dimensions that we're asking for. In fact, in this case, it'll grow, because if we look at it right now, we can see 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and like 1.25 inches by 1.05 inches. And that's, or 1.1 inches roughly. And that's much smaller than really any of the outer dimensions on our bookshelf, that is, length, width, or height. Does anybody remember? Well, let's do it this way. So I'm going to get started on the second part of this, which is to actually dimension out my sketching, or my sketch. And I can do that by just clicking on one of these particular lines. If I mouse over it, it becomes highlighted in a sort of a brighter or a thicker blue line, which lets me know that I have that selected. I can just click on it once, and I'm not clicking and dragging, I just clicked on it once, bring the mouse down, and I get this dimension that follows the mouse. And I can see that, hey, I was actually pretty on the money with that, with the 1.1 inches. I can click right here, and it'll ask me for a size. Now, we dimensioned it to something specifically in the class. Does anybody remember what that was? Or can anybody take a look at what I've been intending to do, keeping in mind the rectangle orientation up here, and maybe take a guess as to what this is supposed to be, because this is going to be one of these dimensions that we saved, one of the user presets. So put it another way, here's our bookshelf where we've got, whoops, width, we've got, wow, height, and we've got depth. It's not letting you dimension something. Do you have a window over here that's labeled Sketch Palette on the right-hand side of your Fusion 360 screen? Are the lines not highlighting when you mouse over them? Or are they highlighting, but you can't click on them? Okay, but it's when you click on something and then you bring the mouse down, it's not bringing along a dimension with it. Okay, and you're just clicking once, right? You're not clicking and dragging? I know there's something for this, but it's been so long. Let's try. What if? Okay, that still does that thing. In fact, it doesn't actually want me to not sketch that dimension. I mean, hey, does not look like a gift horse in the mouth. So, for sometimes Fusion 360 is weird. For this particular bottom one, which of the three dimensions in this drawing do you think that represents, this horrible drawing of mine? Close. Remember, this is a right side view, so imagine you're standing to the, on. Imagine you're standing to the right of the bookcase, staring at it. What does that make this? Well, first off, what does it make this vertical line? Yeah, exactly. It makes it height. So let's actually just go ahead and do that. So we'll We'll replace this with height with a capital H. As you can see, it auto-completes with that. I'll click on it, bam, hit enter, and it gets huge. As you can see, I drew that rectangle really tiny. But this bottom one, though, this bottom one in particular I'm interested in. If we're looking at the bookcase side on, what do you think that bottom one is going to represent? Yours isn't doing it either. I'm not entirely sure. Just try and go through the same thing with making sure you're clicking on one of the lines and you're just clicking once. Make sure you're in sketch mode. Maybe hit escape a couple of times to get out of sketch mode, and then try going back into it again, and I can show you how to do that in a sec. Well, anyway, it's going to be depth. Just to go ahead and, oops. So we're going to say this is depth. Hit enter twice, and bam, we've resized our rectangle to the proper size. Okay, in order to drop out of sketch mode and go back in, I can click this little button down here that says Stop Sketch. And then I can just click on one of these sketch items again, which will bring me back into sketch mode. If I just click on this face, and then I can click on Sketch Dimension again. Oh, you went down to Sketch and then clicked on Sketch Dimension? Yeah, you want to click on Sketch Dimension in order to be able to do that. Sorry, did I skip that step? But yeah, you definitely want to have Sketch Dimension selected in order to be able to do the dimensioning thing. Does that help at all, Cohen? Awesome. Okay. So yeah, now we've created the side of our bookcase. I'm going to go ahead and click Stop Sketch. And this is, yeah, this is the side of our bookcase. Now we have a proper sizing for it. You can obviously get an idea of how big it's supposed to be because this is perfectly reasonable to get a sense of scale for, obviously, naturally, of course, clearly. Let's go back to the presentation and see what we're going to do next, because that's actually where we left off on Wednesday. So now that we've done that, we're actually going to place 3 more rectangles in the design. Inside of that, the bottom is depth. We're going to place 3 more rectangles in our design. And again, we're not going to really worry about placement or size because we're going to go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and use our magical sketch dimension in order to get the different offsets set up properly. So I'm gonna go to 2-point rectangle, bam, and it's gonna ask me which face I want to draw on. It might not ask it for you if you're still in sketch mode, but if you're not, it's gonna ask you which face or plane you want to draw on. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw on the rectangle, and it's gonna get highlighted. I'm gonna click it. It's gonna turn it blue. And I'm going to start up here in the top corner. See how I get a little blue square around the corner? That's how I know that I am starting in the corner. So I want to do that. That is actually something you'll want to do. I'm going to start up in the corner, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle of indeterminate height, but running from one side to the other. And if I mouse over the blue line, I get a little blue X. And that's how I know that I am perfectly on the line. I'm going to click. The bottom line is depth. This one should be depth. Um, but yeah, so you want one rectangle at the top, and then you're going to have one somewhere in the middle. Again, don't worry about where specifically in the middle. Just make sure it runs from one wall to another. Don't worry too much about size either. Just make sure it runs from one wall to another. And then one somewhere in the vicinity, but not not perfectly lined up with the bottom. So as you can see, we've got 3 additional rectangles here. One at the top, one somewhere in the middle, and one close to the bottom. And again, I'm not really worrying about the size of the rectangles or certainly placement for the second 2. I just want to make sure that they run from the front of the bookcase to the back of the bookcase. That is definitely something you're going to want to be certain of. And the reason for that, as you may have already surmised, is that's because we're going to go ahead and dimension all of these out as well. Ah, I jumped the gun a little bit. We want 2 more rectangles. One at the back that runs from the top to the bottom. Okay, 3 horizontal ones and 2 vertical ones. So you got the 3 horizontal ones, one at the top, one near the middle, and one near the bottom. And then you're going to have one vertical one running along the back side, that is the right-hand side of this rectangle. So as you can see, it's running from top to bottom, and it's on the back. Although, again, I'm not too worried about the thickness of this top rectangle. It just has to be on the back. And then one that's running from the bottom of the bottom rectangle to the bottom of the main rectangle. So overall, your design should look something like this. You've got these 3 rectangles here, these 3 horizontal ones, and then you got this one vertical one, and then you got another small vertical one at the very bottom here. So all in all, you'll be making 5. They'll split up into more rectangles if you mouse over them, just because that's what Fusion 360 does, but you'll be making 5 of them. So I'll give you guys a moment to do that. Just go ahead and raise your hand once you've made those rectangles. What do you mean, the second horizontal rectangle or the second vertical one? Second vertical one is down here. It's sort of near the front of the bookcase, but not all the way there, and it's between the bottom horizontal rectangle and the bottom of the bookcase rectangle. So we got 2 hands up so far. I'll just hang out here for a few more minutes and wait for at least a few more hands. 3 hands. All right. 4 hands. Sorry, I'm not trying to make your life more difficult by just like zooming in and out on this thing. I'm actually trying to find a good orientation. Okay, what exactly are you lost on? How much have you done? Have you done any of the rectangles? Okay, well, again, don't worry too much about the size of the rectangles, because again, we're going to sketch the dimension and that will fix them. But you did the three horizontal rectangles, right? Yes, no, maybe? Mateo, do you do the three horizontal rectangles? Regardless of whether or not you feel like they're correct, are those the three that you attempted to do? Okay, so that's the main rectangle that you're referring to, right? The one that represents the bookcase, like the entire bookcase? Yes. If you could, uh, okay. You shouldn't have to dimension three sides of the body because it's a rectangle, so doing two sides will be enough to for the computer to assume what all four sides are going to be dimensioned. Know what I'm saying? Because right now all we're doing is we're doing a side-on view of this bookcase. And really, what these rectangles are supposed to represent is kind of a cutaway. So this is like, so you know how a bookcase is built out of plywood, I guess, or planks. Yes, like this top one is the the top of the bookcase. This is the back wall of the bookcase. This is a shelf, and then this is another shelf. That's what these rectangles are representing right now inside of the main rectangle. The main rectangle represents the one of the side walls of the bookshelf. So imagine you had like X-ray vision and you were looking at the side of the bookshelf. You could see the side wall, but then like kind of through the side wall, you could see the shelves and the walls of the bookshelf at like a side-on view, you know? So so far you have the main body of the bookcase dimensioned out. Do you have any of these additional rectangles drawn yet? Okay, I'll go ahead and circle the shelves. So this is a shelf, and this is a shelf. Um, whoops. This right here is the top board of the bookshelf. That, like, you know, if the top of the bookshelf being, you know, what you'd place stuff on top of, like you might place another bookshelf on top, who knows? And then this is the back wall of the bookshelf. Yeah, that's what the blue is. The blue is the top panel. It is the top of the bookshelf. This additional little tiny one down here, that's a kick plate. Does that make a little bit more sense now? That's brown, but yes, yeah. Okay. So do you have all these rectangles? Okay. Go ahead and add them and then raise your hand once you're done. So you got 3 horizontal ones. Okay. All right. This is going to be a tiny bookshelf. Tiny, tiny bookshelf. All right, excellent. So let us continue. So now we need to dimension each of these rectangles. Not only the size of the rectangles, but the distance that the rectangles sit from one another and where they sit in relation to this greater rectangle, which represents the bookshelf profile as a whole. So let me go ahead and go back to sketch dimension. So I'm going to do something a little weird here. I'm going to zoom in up here. I'm going to click on this bottom line once. So now it's highlighted. Then I'm going to click on this top line. So it's highlighted. And then I'm going to move the mouse out horizontally. So now as you can see right here, I've got 2 lines and my arrow's running. So between them, what I'm dimensioning right now is I am dimensioning the distance between this top and bottom line. So I clicked on the bottom line and then the top line. Really, you could click on the top line and then the bottom line. It's not really going to matter. But the important thing is I'm dimensioning those 2 lines. So let me go ahead and click out here. Bam. And then I'm going to set this to ply. P-L-Y. enter, enter, and it gets much thinner. What do you think ply is in this case, considering my explanation of what these rectangles represented? Yeah, it's essentially the thickness of the wood you'll be using in order to build this bookshelf. So does that make things a little clearer about how you're looking at a cross-section, kind of? I'm going to go ahead and sketch, sketch dimension here too, using the same thing. I'm also going to set that to ply, P-L-Y, bam, bam. I'm going to do that here as well. Ply, bam, bam. I'm basically setting the thickness of all of these to ply because this bookshelf is going to be built out of the same thickness of wood all around. And notice down here, since, remember how I said that this was a vertical rectangle, even though it's kind of hard to tell because it looks like largely like a square. I clicked on the left and right walls and then dimensioned it down this way because I want, hello, there we go. I want the thickness of it to change horizontally. So now I've dimensioned all of these rectangles themselves so that they have a thickness of ply. Now I need to dimension the distance between these rectangles. So I'll give you guys a moment to dimension them all out so they look like that. Go ahead and raise your hand once you've done that, and we'll dimension the next parts out. Got one hand up so far. Two hands. By the way, I'm not doing that to rush you guys or anything like that. I just want to let you guys know that I'm acknowledging that I see your hands. That's really all that is. It's not like, oh, there are two hands up now. Better go faster. Because that's not really the intention. Three hands. Oops. This one, as you can see, the distance between these two vertical lines is ply. It's going to have a height set to it as well, but we're going to get to that in a moment once we've got everybody, once everybody's dimensioned out the thickness of all these rectangles to ply. Yeah, maybe this gives a little bit of a clearer idea as to what I mean by vertical and horizontal rectangles, because there's very clearly a longer side on these rectangles, and when I say vertical or horizontal, I'm referring to the longer side on them. In this case, the longer side is vertical, so this is a vertical rectangle, this one's a vertical rectangle, this one's a horizontal one, another horizontal one, another horizontal one. All right, let's see if we can't get this finished out with the dimensions before we hit 9. We might run a little bit over, but I want to get at least this side done so we can start extruding on Monday, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. Like Play-Doh. Raise your hand if you're still working on it. As Diva would say, winky face. I obviously don't have Diva's voice, so I can't really do that. Okay. All right. We'll go until 8:55, and then we'll dimension the last couple of things out, and then we'll do the normal ending things. Can't set the dimensions. Is it telling you that you don't have valid dimensions, or what? Are you not able to select the sides that you want to dimension? What exactly? What are you trying to do, and where are you running into a hang-up? We'll call it a class here. Let me go ahead and do the poll questions in the meantime, and then we can spend this time just sort of troubleshooting all this stuff, and then we'll meet up again on Monday. So, yep, first poll question incoming.